it taught me to associate emotions like anxiety with pathologies and diagnoses like generalized anxiety disorder.
That is author Sarah Fay about some of her experiences with mental health and recovery. This audio is an excerpt from her video conversation with Megan Gibson at the Anxiety Super Conference. See the Creative Mind podcast page for details and links.
This is a conversation I've been wanting to have for years because the combination of creativity and mental health and anxiety is something I just don't think that we talk about enough. And creatives are so important in this conversation because we're the translators, I think. We experience hard things and then figure out a way to talk about it in a way that make others feel less alone. And so the fact that you talk about mental health and anxiety openly in your work is why I wanted to have you on. And so I guess I want to start with, what are the pluses and minuses of receiving diagnosis like anxiety or something like that?
Yeah, my whole book, Pathological, is about this. And just to give a little bit of background without going too much into it, but I was first diagnosed, so I received 6 diagnoses over the course of 25 years. And my memoir, Pathological, The True Story of 6 Misdiagnoses, is about that time. It's a memoir of that time. And just to dovetail into what you're talking about with creativity, there was no question that I was going to be a writer. I never even made the decision. It just was there, and it just continued in my mind. So that was, I was going to be a creative, but we didn't talk about it like that then. This is the 1980s. It just wasn't in the public discourse in the same way that it is now. But so that was always in there, and I knew that was going to be my trajectory. I guess I didn't know it, but that was my trajectory. So I received 6 diagnoses, and my first one came when I was 12. And a lot of Pathological is about, and I think I know this is something we're seeing now with young people on TikTok and on Instagram, self-diagnosing, but also receiving diagnoses very young. For me, and my experience was that it taught me to associate emotions like anxiety with pathologies and diagnoses like generalized anxiety disorder. And it was just, no one explained to me that even with a diagnosis, it doesn't go away. And so much of my life was spent hoping that the next diagnosis was going to be the explanation, was going to be the reason, and that it would make my life easier in some ways. And I think that's something that it can for some people. It didn't for me. That was not my experience. And so it just led to 25 years in the mental health system. When I was in my 20s, I received diagnoses. So when I was 12, it was anorexia. Then in my 20s, generalized anxiety disorder, then major depressive disorder. In my 30s, it was ADHD, then OCD, then ADHD and OCD, and then finally bipolar 2 and then bipolar 1. And it was just a very, very difficult 25 years, half of my life. And part of it, I think, and this was something going to being a creative in this world and how difficult that is, when I finally did recover, and I have fully recovered, which is something I also didn't even know was possible. I didn't know people did that, because it's also, my experience was that my mental health professionals never even said the word recovery. I didn't know there was a recovery movement. I didn't know that people recovered a lot. And so that was something I had to learn first before I could recover. But during my recovery, I read Randy Nessa. I don't know if you know him, but Randy Nessa, he's a psychiatrist, and maybe he's a psychologist. I think he's a psychologist. But anyway, he's at University of Michigan, and he wrote a wonderful book called Good Reasons for Bad Feelings. Highly recommended. And it really blew my mind. But one thing he said was, and it is basically evolutionary psychiatry, evolutionary psychology, which is really changed my whole paradigm and taught me that, wait, I am literally made for anxiety. I am designed for anxiety. This is what humans are good at. And it's what saves our lives. But we're just living in an environment where our anxiety kicks in when I open my email. And it's not a reason we're not on the plains. We're not running from a lion at this point, but my body doesn't know that. And my mind doesn't always know that.